The arena smelled of dust and fear. The late afternoon sun burned hot against the bleachers, baking the iron rails until they seared any palm that gripped them too tight. Hundreds of voices rose and fell like the restless tide, vendors shouting out cola and hot dog prices, children squealing as they tugged parents by the wrist, rodeo cowboys murmuring about odds and bets. But in the center of it all stood an empty stretch of reddish dirt, marked by hoofprints and the ragged scrapes of boots dragged backward in terror. No one saw him at first. He slipped in among the crowd quiet as a breeze, his thin frame hidden by shadows under the bleachers. He wore faded jeans with one leg cut short above a steel brace strapped to his knee. The metal joints squeaked softly with each uneven step. His sneakers were old, canvas frayed at the heel, and his hair stuck up at odd angles, as if he'd rolled out of bed and forgotten to care what the world might think. One boy near the entrance elbowed his friend and snickered, "Hey, Tin-Leg Tommy's here." His friend laughed behind a soda cup. Tommy didn't flinch. His eyes stayed locked on the steel gates across the arena. Behind those gates waited a creature that haunted every rancher's sleep. The bull's name was Diablo. A towering mass of black muscle, horns curved like ivory scythes, eyes dark as night with a single white streak down its nose. 2 years earlier, Diablo had thrown his rider high into the air and gored him before the clowns could distract him away. That rider never walked again. Since then, Diablo had been branded a killer. Sponsors loved it. Fans loved it. Cowboys feared it. And today, the whispers ran hot through the arena. If Diablo killed another man, the ranch owner would have him put down before the sun set. Tommy limped to the rail, gripping the cool iron as he watched handlers slap the bull's flanks, testing its rage. It tossed its head, nostrils flaring, snorting out clots of dirt. A shadow fell across Tommy's shoulder. His father stood behind him, arms folded tight against his chest. His jaw worked silently as he stared out at the animal. "Tommy," he said finally, his voice low, "don't even think about going down there." Tommy didn't turn. His eyes were glassy, unfocused, fixed on something far beyond the gates and the roaring crowds. "I'm not thinking," he said softly. "I'm remembering." His father's lips tightened. For a long moment he said nothing, only breathing in slow, silent anger. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Tommy at the rail alone. Down in the holding pen, Diablo struck the gate with his horn, shaking the chains until the latch quivered. The handler cursed and slapped its side again. The bull spun, nearly crushing him against the rails. The crowd gasped as the man stumbled back, holding his ribs. Tommy watched with eyes that didn't blink. His chest rose and fell in quiet rhythm. His hands, thin and scarred, clutched the rail tighter. He remembered another day, a day before Diablo was a legend, before he was called Diablo at all. Tommy was 6 years old, limping through summer grass behind his mother's house. He carried a bucket of feed for the goats, dragging it along the dirt. Halfway across the field, he heard a shrill, desperate cry. He turned. There in the fence corner, a calf lay trapped. Barbed wire twisted tight around its leg, cutting into the flesh until blood stained the pale grass. The calf thrashed and cried out again, eyes rolling in panic. Tommy didn't hesitate. He dropped the bucket and shuffled forward, nearly falling as his brace caught on a root. Kneeling hurt. The metal cut into his skin and rocks dug into his knee. But he reached into his back pocket for the tiny garden shears he always carried to cut stubborn weed stems. He worked the blades around the wire, nicking his thumb until blood welled bright. Finally the last strand snapped free. The calf jerked its leg back, stumbled upright, and staggered away, turning only once to stare at the boy who sat breathing hard in the dirt, sweat dripping off his nose. Its eyes were deep, endless black. And for a moment, looking into them, Tommy felt something shift inside his chest, as if an invisible thread had pulled tight between his small trembling heart and the creature's wild, raging soul. A roar rose up from the crowd, snapping Tommy back to the present. Over the loudspeaker, an announcer's voice boomed, "Ladies and gentlemen, today's final challenge, Diablo the Untamable, against the bravest rider in the county." But there was no rider waiting at the gate. Tommy turned from the rail and began limping along the arena edge, heading for the open access ramp. A security guard noticed him and frowned. "Hey, kid, where's your parent pass? You can't be down here." Tommy kept walking. His limp was pronounced now, brace squeaking with each step, as if the sound itself carried him forward. The guard called again, harsher this time, but his voice was lost under the swelling music pumping from the speakers. One of the rodeo clowns, face painted in bright blue tears, caught sight of Tommy and squinted. "You lost, little man?" Tommy didn't answer. He reached the gate, gripping the cool iron, feeling its vibrations as Diablo struck the other side again. The gatekeeper glanced down at him and chuckled softly. "Ain't no place for a boy like you, son. Move along." Tommy raised his eyes, and the gatekeeper paused. There was no fear in that gaze. No bravado either. Just a quiet, unbreakable resolve that made the old man's chest tighten. He swallowed. "You know what you're doing?" Tommy nodded once. With trembling fingers, the gatekeeper unlatched the iron bar. The gate swung open, and the world seemed to stop breathing. Tommy stepped into the arena. The sun burned white overhead, blinding him for a moment. The crowd fell silent, murmurs spreading like wildfire. A boy. There was a boy in the arena. A crippled boy. Across the ring, Diablo turned. His eyes locked on Tommy instantly, pupils narrowing into thin black slits. He pawed the dirt, snorted, steam rising from his nostrils in the hot, still air. Tommy took another step forward, cane digging into the soft dirt as he limped. He let his eyes drift half-closed, feeling the baked dust beneath his shoes, the rough cotton of his jeans against his skin, the harsh metallic scent of blood still trapped somewhere deep in his memory. Diablo's muscles bunched. A shiver ran along his massive shoulders, down his broad spine to the tip of his whip-like tail. Tommy stopped walking. He let his cane fall. It struck the ground with a hollow clang, bouncing once before landing flat in the dirt. The arena was silent now. Not a breath, not a cough, not a whisper. Tommy raised his hand. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then Diablo lowered his head. The ground shook as he began to run. Dust billowed up in great choking clouds, hooves pounding deep craters into the arena floor. His horns gleamed under the savage sun, slicing through the air like blades as he thundered forward. Tommy stood unmoving, his thin chest rising and falling, eyes fixed on the creature that bore down on him like a black storm. Time stretched impossibly long, every second expanding into forever. The smell of earth and sweat and iron filled Tommy's lungs until he felt his heart might burst from the pressure. A scream tore from somewhere in the crowd, raw and terrified. But Tommy didn't hear it. In that moment, there was only him. And the bull. The thunder of hooves roared louder, echoing inside his ribcage. And then, just before Diablo's horns could pierce his fragile chest, just before 1,800 pounds of fury collided with an unmoving boy, the world went black. The blackness wasn't death. It was dust, rising thick and choking in the sudden silence after impact never came. Tommy's eyes burned, tears welling against the grit as he forced them open. Through the swirling haze, he saw Diablo's massive hooves planted inches before him, chest heaving, sides rippling with coiled muscle. The bull's head was down, horns lowered, but his eyes were locked on Tommy's with something that wasn't rage. It was recognition. For a moment, neither moved. The world held its breath, suspended between fear and awe. Tommy felt the tremor in his knees, the deep ache in his thigh where the brace bit into flesh. But he didn't back away. Slowly, as if each second was carved from stone, he reached out his trembling hand. His fingers hovered above Diablo's snout, just brushing the coarse, sweat-dampened hair between the horns. A warmth radiated up his arm, a living heat that thrummed in quiet warning. The bull snorted, shaking its massive head violently. The motion knocked Tommy's hand aside, and he stumbled backward, his heel catching on the dropped cane behind him. His arms flailed as he fell, slamming onto his back. The pain jolted up his spine, knocking the breath from his lungs. He gasped soundlessly, mouth opening and closing as dust filled his teeth. Diablo reared back. For a heartbeat, he seemed to hover in the burning afternoon light, a silhouette of raw power and darkness against the searing sky. Then he came down hard, front hooves slamming into the dirt beside Tommy's chest. The impact shook the ground, rattling Tommy's bones. The bull lowered his head, horns gleaming inches from Tommy's throat. His hot breath washed over the boy's face, heavy with the scent of hay and blood and earth. Tommy's eyes fluttered shut. In his mind, another memory rose like a ghost from the silent fields of his childhood. He was 8, sitting on the wooden fence that ringed the north pasture. The summer sun burned the back of his neck as he watched the calves play, bucking and snorting in dusty little circles. Behind him, his father leaned against the pickup truck, hat pulled low over his brow. "Why do they fight like that?" Tommy had asked, his voice small and curious. His father spit tobacco into the dirt and said nothing for a while. Finally, he turned his face toward the calves and squinted into the glare. "Because fighting is easier than trusting," he said. "They'll butt heads until the day one goes down. That's just how bulls are." Tommy had nodded, though he hadn't really understood. Back then, he thought trust was as simple as reaching out your hand. A sharp snort dragged him back to the present. Diablo's muzzle pressed harder against his chest. The bull's eyes bored into his black depths, swirling with flickering shadows of pain, memory, confusion. Tommy could feel his own pulse hammering wildly under his ribs. But deeper still was another rhythm, slower, stronger, the heartbeat of something wild and wounded, echoing in time with his own. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking in the dusty quiet. "Please, don't." For a long moment, there was no sound but the bull's ragged breathing. Tommy felt its warm breath wash over his face again and again, as if tasting his fear, measuring its weight. Then, with a sudden explosive motion, Diablo jerked his head back, tossing up clouds of dust as he spun away. His hooves thundered across the arena, carrying him in a wide, circling arc that carved a path around the fallen boy. The crowd erupted. Cheers, screams, frantic applause. Somewhere above, the announcer's voice cracked with disbelief. I can't believe what I'm seeing, folks. The boy he's alive. Diablo he didn't touch him." Tommy rolled onto his side, coughing hard. His arms trembled as he pushed himself upright. The pain in his leg flared sharp and bright, stealing his breath, but he forced himself to stand. The world wobbled and spun. He tasted blood where he'd bitten his tongue. Across the arena, Diablo slowed, turning to face him again. His sides heaved with each labored breath, ribs expanding like bellows. Dust clung to his black hide in patches of gray. Tommy wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. His fingers came away streaked with blood and dirt. He didn't care. He lifted his gaze, meeting the bull's dark eyes across the churned-up earth. Something flickered there, a memory, a thread of connection pulled tight through years and pain and survival. Slowly, he took a step forward. The crowd fell silent once more. Even the wind seemed to pause, hanging heavy in the scorching afternoon heat. Tommy's limp was worse now. Each step sent jolts of agony up his thigh. His brace squeaked with every trembling shift of weight. But he didn't stop. His gaze remained locked on Diablo, unblinking, unafraid. The bull pawed at the ground, tossing his head in agitation. Dust billowed around his hooves, curling upward like smoke from a dying fire. Tommy paused a few feet away, swaying with exhaustion. His chest rose and fell in ragged gasps. The sun burned his skin, sweat dripping down his back in salty rivulets. "Do you remember me?" he asked softly. His voice cracked, but the words carried across the quiet arena. Diablo snorted again, stamping the ground so hard that flecks of dirt hit Tommy's shins. The boy didn't flinch. He let his arm drop to his side, palm open, fingers curling in and out with silent plea. "I remember you," he whispered. "I remember the wire. I remember cutting it away. I remember your eyes." A tremor ran through Diablo's massive frame. His ears twitched forward, catching the sound. His nostrils flared, sucking in the boy's scent, tasting the truth hidden beneath the sweat and fear. Slowly, impossibly, the bull lowered his massive head. His horns angled away as his nose hovered inches above Tommy's open hand. His breath came in slow, heavy huffs, stirring the dust at their feet. For a moment, time fell silent. The stands, the sky, the sun, the earth. All of it dissolved into the space between boy and beast. Tommy felt something loosen in his chest, a tightness he'd carried for so long he'd forgotten it was there. Tears welled hot behind his eyes, blurring the bull's silhouette into something shimmering, almost holy. "Thank you," he breathed. Diablo blinked slowly, dark lashes sweeping down like shadows falling across twilight fields. Then, with a sudden jolt, he jerked his head back, snorting violently. His front hoof struck the ground, spraying dirt across Tommy's jeans. The boy staggered but caught himself, raising his eyes again. Diablo spun in a wide circle, horns flashing under the afternoon sun. His tail lashed the air, muscles rippling under his black hide. Then, with a roar that seemed to shake the very bones of the earth, he charged. The crowd screamed. Tommy's chest seized. His pulse exploded in his throat as he stumbled backward, his bad leg buckling beneath him. He fell hard onto his side, pain flaring white-hot. The bull thundered forward, hooves tearing deep gouges into the arena floor. Dust rose in towering clouds around him as he came, unstoppable, a living storm of flesh and rage and memory. Tommy struggled to stand, fingers clawing at the dirt. The brace caught again, twisting his knee until he screamed out loud. The sound tore from his throat, ragged and raw, swallowed instantly by the roar of pounding hooves. Diablo's head lowered, horns angled to gore. The world blurred into a smear of sunlit dust and black charging shadow. Tommy's breath came in desperate gasps, tears streaming down his cheeks. He pressed his palms into the dirt, trying to push himself upright, but his arms trembled and collapsed beneath him. He felt the bull's shadow fall across his back. He felt the earth shake with the final strides. He felt the scream rise from his lungs and tear free into the burning sky. And then, everything stopped. The scream tore from his chest, high and thin like a wounded animal's cry, but it dissolved into silence as he squeezed his eyes shut and waited for the tearing pain of horns through flesh. It never came. Instead, there was a sudden, suffocating stillness, heavy as stone. Dust choked the air, curling into his mouth and nose until his lungs burned. Slowly, trembling, Tommy opened his eyes. Diablo stood over him, hooves planted wide, chest heaving. His head was lowered so close that Tommy could see each coarse black hair lining his snout, could smell the warm reek of grass and blood on his breath. The bull's horns curved past Tommy's shoulders, digging shallow trenches in the dirt on either side of his neck. The boy's entire body shook, but he could not look away from those eyes. They were so dark they seemed endless, but in their depths flickered something wild and wordless, something that reached into Tommy's chest and pulled at the hidden ache he carried there. He felt his vision blur with tears. The sound of the arena faded to a faraway hum. He could no longer hear the gasps of the crowd, the pounding of his terrified heart, or the ragged rush of his breath. All he heard was the quiet memory of hooves against grass and the lonely call of a calf trapped in barbed wire. He was 6 again, kneeling beside that bleeding calf, fingers working clumsily to free the tangled wire biting into its leg. The wire sliced his thumb open to the bone, but he didn't stop. Blood ran down his wrist and dripped onto the grass, mingling with the calf's own. When the last strand snapped, the calf leapt back in fear, nearly knocking him over. For a heartbeat it stared at him, those same black eyes blinking with something like confusion, something almost like gratitude, and then it ran away into the tall grass, limping slightly but free. A hot tear slipped down Tommy's cheek, cutting a clean line through the dirt smeared across his face. His voice came out as a cracked whisper. "It's you, isn't it?" Diablo snorted softly. A puff of hot air ruffled Tommy's hair. The bull shifted his weight, hooves crunching the dirt beneath them, but he didn't move away. For the first time, Tommy saw the white scar running across the bull's front leg, just above the knee. The hair there grew in uneven patches around a thin, pale seam of twisted skin. His chest clenched tight. A sob rose into his throat, bitter and painful, but he swallowed it back. "Please," he whispered. "Don't let them kill you. Don't give them a reason." Diablo's ears flicked forward, catching the sound of his voice. He blinked slowly, and in that silent moment, the ache inside Tommy's chest expanded into something too big for words. He felt it pushing against his ribs, swelling upward, bursting behind his eyes in a flood of hot tears. His arms trembled as he reached out again, fingers curling gently around the bull's broad, scarred muzzle. The hair was rough under his fingertips, damp with sweat and dust. For a moment, neither moved. The boy and the bull remained locked in a silent circle. Two shadows merged beneath the burning sky. Tommy's thumb brushed over the scar on Diablo's leg, and he felt the bull flinch ever so slightly beneath his touch. His own scarred thumb matched its angle perfectly. An invisible thread pulled tight between them, memory bound to memory, pain to pain, mercy to mercy. "Good boy," Tommy whispered, his voice cracking like dry grass underfoot. "Good boy." A flicker of movement at the edge of his vision broke the trance. Tommy glanced up to see a cluster of ranch hands and rodeo clowns creeping along the arena wall, ropes and tranquilizer guns clutched in nervous hands. Their eyes were wide with fear. One of the handlers raised his rifle, sighting down the barrel at Diablo's broad chest. Tommy's heart seized with sudden panic. "No!" he cried out, voice ragged and raw. Diablo jerked his head up, snorting, ears swiveling toward the boy's scream. The rifleman froze, startled by the boy's sudden movement. "Don't shoot!" Tommy shouted again, louder this time. His voice cracked but carried across the silent arena. The crowd shifted, murmurs rising like a restless tide. "Please, please, he's not going to hurt anyone." "Kid!" shouted one of the rodeo judges from behind the rails. "Get away from him now." Tommy shook his head violently. Tears streaked down his face, cutting clean tracks through the dust and blood. His leg throbbed with a deep, pulsing pain, but he ignored it. He pressed his forehead against Diablo's snout, feeling the bull's hot, rough breath against his skin. "It's okay," he whispered. "I promise. It's okay." For a moment, Diablo's massive body trembled with suppressed energy. The bull shifted his weight, hooves grinding into the dirt as if preparing to charge. Tommy felt the vibration through his ribs, into his spine, into his heart. But instead of lurching forward, Diablo let out a deep, rumbling sigh that seemed to rise from somewhere dark and hidden within him. His head lowered further until his horns touched the ground on either side of Tommy's legs. His great dark eyes closed. Tommy swallowed back a sob. His hands shook as he stroked the bull's scarred muzzle. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for remembering." The sound of the tranquilizer gun cocking shattered the silence like glass. Tommy jerked his head up, eyes wide with panic. The rifleman's hands trembled as he sighted down at Diablo's broad shoulder. "Move, boy," he barked. "No," Tommy screamed, voice cracking into a desperate wail. "Don't hurt him, please." His plea was swallowed by the hiss of the tranquilizer dart slicing through the burning afternoon air. Diablo flinched as the dart embedded itself in his shoulder with a dull thud. His eyes flew open, wild and confused, nostrils flaring as his muscles tensed beneath the tranquilizer's sting. A strangled noise tore from his throat, half roar, half sob. He staggered sideways, nearly knocking Tommy over with the sudden lurch of his massive body. "No!" Tommy screamed again, grabbing fistfuls of the bull's coarse hair as tears poured down his dirt-streaked face. Diablo's legs buckled. He sank to his knees, his enormous head swinging back and forth as if trying to shake off an invisible weight. Foam gathered at the corners of his mouth, dripping into the dust. Tommy clung to him desperately, arms wrapped around his massive neck. "I'm sorry," he choked out between sobs. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this." Diablo let out a low, shuddering groan. His eyelids fluttered, pupils rolling back into darkness as his head sagged heavily against Tommy's chest. The boy staggered under the bull's weight but refused to let go. He pressed his cheek against Diablo's coarse hair, feeling the fading heat of his trembling body. A hush fell over the arena. Cowboys lowered their hats. The announcer's voice was silent. For the first time all afternoon, even the children stopped crying. Tommy closed his eyes. The sound of his own heartbeat pounded in his ears, mingling with the slowing, weakening breaths of the creature pressed against him. The ache in his chest pulsed so hard it hurt to breathe. "Please," he whispered, voice breaking into a sob. "Please don't go. Please don't leave me." But Diablo's breathing slowed further. His massive chest rose and fell with deep, labored sighs, each one softer than the last. His head slid down until his nose rested in the dust at Tommy's feet. His eyes closed, lashes dark against his scarred cheek. Tommy stayed kneeling beside him, fingers buried deep in his rough black hair, tears dripping onto the bull's still warm hide. He didn't notice the guards approaching. He didn't hear the crowd begin to murmur again. All he felt was the fading life under his shaking hands, the memory of a scar beneath rough fur, and the silent echo of a calf's terrified cry years ago on a sunlit field. A quiet voice broke through the roaring in his ears. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more breathtaking tales like this. The words drifted like smoke, floating through his grief without touching it. Tommy closed his eyes tighter, shutting out the world, clutching Diablo's massive head against his chest as if he could force life back into it through sheer will. Then, just as the tranquilizer's final wave washed over Diablo's trembling body, the bull opened his eyes one last time. For a fleeting second, they were clear and dark and endless, and they fixed on Tommy's tear-streaked face with an expression that wasn't fear or pain. It was mercy. And then the light faded from those eyes, leaving only silent, black pools reflecting the boy's broken gaze back at him. They came for him with gloved hands and lowered voices. 2 ranch hands approached first, rough denim brushing against Tommy's knees as they bent down to lift Diablo's massive head off the dirt. Tommy refused to let go. His fingers curled tighter into the coarse black hair, knuckles white with grief. The men paused, exchanging a glance before one of them spoke softly. "Son, you need to move. We gotta get him loaded." Tommy didn't answer. He pressed his forehead against Diablo's still warm cheek, inhaling the fading scent of sweat, earth, and something deeper, that ancient, silent musk of life moving through blood and bone. His tears dripped onto the bull's lashes, catching in the fine dark hairs before rolling away into the dust. The vet came next, a tall woman with sunburned cheeks and silver hair tied back in a rough braid. She knelt beside the boy, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. "He's asleep," she murmured. "Just asleep for now. They're taking him back to the ranch." Tommy turned his head, eyes blurred and red-rimmed. Are they going to kill him?" The vet sighed softly, her thumb stroking a smear of dried blood from his jawline. "I don't know. But I'll do what I can to stop it. I promise." He searched her eyes for any hint of false comfort. There was none. Only tired truth. Slowly, trembling, Tommy loosened his grip on Diablo's fur. His fingers fell away, hovering inches above the bull's flank as the ranch hands slid heavy ropes under the massive neck and chest. They heaved together, grunting with effort as they rolled the bull onto a wide canvas sling. Dust rose around them in thick clouds. A tractor backed up with a winch, chains rattling against steel as they hooked the sling and lifted Diablo's limp body off the ground. Tommy watched as the bull rose into the air, legs dangling heavy and loose, head drooping so far down his horns nearly scraped the dirt. For a moment, as the sun blazed down from above, Diablo's black hide seemed to shimmer like polished onyx. Tommy's chest tightened. The world swam and blurred through the salt sting of tears. His father was there suddenly, rough hand on his good shoulder, fingers curling tight. "Come on," he said, his voice low, ragged with something he couldn't say aloud. "Let's go home." But Tommy didn't move. He watched as the tractor rumbled away, hauling Diablo toward the livestock gate at the far end of the arena. The bull's tail dragged along the dirt, leaving a faint line in its wake like a final signature etched into the earth. His father's grip tightened. "Tommy." No, the word came out choked, half sob, half defiance. I have to say goodbye." His father let go. Silence passed between them, heavy with the ache of things neither knew how to mend. Tommy limped forward, each step a burning throb from hip to knee to ankle. The pain barely registered. His eyes stayed locked on Diablo's broad shoulders, rising and falling slightly with shallow, drugged breaths. At the gate, ranch hands paused to adjust the sling. Tommy stepped up beside the dangling bull. The sun dipped low now, casting long blue shadows across the arena. Flies buzzed lazily around Diablo's drooping ears. Tommy reached out a trembling hand and pressed it to the bull's cheek. Diablo's eyelids fluttered open, heavy and glazed with sleep. But for one slow, eternal heartbeat, their eyes met in quiet understanding. Tommy swallowed against the tightness in his throat. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not hurting me, for remembering me." The bull's nostrils flared with a single, ragged exhale. His ears twitched weakly toward the boy's voice. In that fleeting moment, Tommy saw him not as Diablo the killer, nor as the calf trapped in wire, but as both, a creature shaped by pain and mercy alike, born into a world that demanded rage but still carried within him the memory of kindness. A ranch hand shifted impatiently. "We gotta go, kid." Tommy nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of candy, a peppermint, melted into its clear plastic wrap from the heat of his palm. Slowly, he peeled back the sticky wrapper and held it up to Diablo's lips. The bull's massive nostrils twitched, catching the sweet, sharp scent of mint. His cracked tongue flicked out once, tasting the boy's offering. A soft, rattling sigh escaped his chest as his eyes drifted closed again. Tommy pressed the candy gently against the bull's lips, letting it rest there before tucking it into the corner of his mouth. His fingers lingered a moment longer, feeling the heavy warmth of life beneath cold, damp breath. Then he stepped back. The tractor engine revved, chains creaking as Diablo's sling tightened and lifted him fully off the ground. The sun caught on his horns, turning them into two blazing crescents against the deepening sky. Tommy watched until the bull passed through the gates and out of sight, swallowed by shadows and the hush of a waiting world. His shoulders sagged. The ache in his leg finally roared back into awareness, pulsing in time with his slowing heart. He turned to find his father standing a few feet away, hands shoved into his pockets, eyes shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. "You shouldn't have done that," his father said softly. There was no anger in his voice now, only fear. Only love he didn't know how to say. Tommy wiped the back of his wrist across his tear-slicked cheeks. "I had to," he whispered. He needed to know someone saw him. Really saw him. His father swallowed hard. For a long moment, neither moved. Then he stepped forward and placed his hand on Tommy's shoulder again, this time with a gentleness that made the boy's chest ache even more. Together, they turned and began the long, silent walk back through the arena tunnel. Behind them, the stadium lights flickered on as dusk bled into darkness. The crowd spilled out into the parking lots, voices rising in anxious chatter. They spoke of the boy, the bull, the mercy, the madness. Some called it a miracle. Some called it suicide postponed. But none who witnessed it would ever forget the sight of a crippled child standing unarmed before a creature born of rage, offering nothing but a trembling hand and a piece of candy. At the edge of the tunnel, Tommy paused. He turned back for one final look at the empty arena, lit now in harsh white that made the churned dirt glow pale as bone. The silence pressed down heavy on his shoulders, filled with echoes of hooves, screams, and the quiet exhale of a bull laying down his rage for a memory of mercy. He closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw Diablo running free across wide open fields, the wire gone from his leg, the pain gone from his eyes, horns gleaming under a gentle sun. He saw himself running beside him, no brace biting into his thigh, no limp slowing his steps. Just a boy and a bull and the earth beneath their feet, wild and endless. When he opened his eyes again, the arena was still empty. But in his chest, something silent and unbreakable had taken root. A pact made without words, sealed without ink. Sometimes, the fiercest hearts just need to be remembered. As he limped out into the cooling night, his father's hand resting steady on his shoulder, Tommy felt the echo of hooves in his chest, a reminder that mercy is never wasted, and that somewhere in the darkness, even a creature born of rage can remember the trembling kindness of a wounded boy. And that, in the end, is what saves us all.